arrived, this is Boudica land, Boudica country. For anyone that knows that, we're going to talk about that a bit again a bit later, because she's such an important character in history. And when we talk about Queen Boudica, everyone thinks of the barbaric, vicious woman that slayed the Romans and defeated the Roman invasion. In fact, there was a soft heart to her as well. She was a great healer, she was a great teacher of alchemy, and she was absolutely wonderful at doing all sorts of natural healing processes, from a raising really. And you wonder how she did that. Well, she did that in one simple step. That is quite the irony of it is that she was a Celtic queen, a Gaelic queen. And if you trace her ancestry back, it goes back to Ireland, or to Daliata, and further onwards backwards to that. So look at the old lands of Daliata, and then we can see that Queen Boudica fits into that quite nicely. It's important to say that there was never a real Englishman, ever. This part of the land wasn't this shaped land. We know that it was all one large plate, and this was mainly forest land and woodlands. You know, so it was only from, you know, Boudica, well, it's a Neolithic period, but Boudica had a great importance in coming into Mercia and into East Anglia at that point in time. Here, 1937 is the focus, I guess, really. In 1937, a local farmhand happened to be going out early morning, and here's the most detailed description, he saw a headless horseman gallant out of this church and down towards the bridge. So he gallanted down here, straight out of the main gate there, and the headless horseman rode down towards the bridge there. The farmhand was so shocked and taken back by the event that he claims to have passed out on the side of the road there, and that's why he was late for his work by some 2 hours, because with the event he was so shocked and taken back he collapsed and fell. But that's not the only story of the Headless Horseman. The Headless Horseman comes into play back in 1948. The story again of a local villager seeing the Headless Horseman in 1967. And even as young as 1992 the Headless Horseman was seen here. Yet you'll find very little on the internet about it. It's almost like brushed under a carpet. And as we talk about things being brushed under a carpet, I think in the next clip we'll be able to show you something that's quite interesting within the church, to actually find out who the Headless Horseman might very well be. The church has always been known as St Andrew, not St Andrews. What's interesting is the church itself sits on a plot of land that the graveyard originally extended right across the new road, which we're going to show you a bit later on when we're filming outside. And there's one particular gravestone with old Celtic origin. It's right in the far northeastern quadrant of the actual cemetery, right on its own, you'd think. But if we take it back 300 or 400 years, it wasn't on its own at all. It would have been with other graves going across the road that clearly, obviously, roadways have been put in. We're in Boudica country, and what do we mean by that? Well, we've got Queen Boudica. We're looking at 60 CE, 60 Common Era. And there's many things we're going to be talking about over the next few hours, but what's really interesting with St Andrew Church is that actually my relative did all the paintings. Our distant relative did all the paintings on here, going all the way around, which are absolutely beautiful. His name was actually Neville, from the Neville family, from Lord Neville, and from the Earl of Wessex, and from the Earl of Raby, what was known as them. So that's quite interesting as well. But what's even more interesting is we get here to the top part of the church. When we walked in, it felt quite different. It's quite dark in here, and you probably can't appreciate that because we've had to put the lights on, modern technology. But even the pulpit, they have candles lurking about, and there's some very interesting architraves, some certainly interesting sculptures and things. But always look where you don't want to look. And we see the right here, and I thought, well, that's a bit odd. And as I walked over it, it's a bit lumpy, and I thought, why is that a bit lumpy? And as we started to look at that, we rolled it back. And for some reason, I don't know, for the grace of God, or whatever, we're covering up, which I think is quite disrespectful actually, but we're covering up Lady Holland, and we're covering up, more importantly, a rather interesting item as well, I think. So we're just going to have a look at that. and then we'll see what's underneath there, to why they're not wanted. It's just a bit disrespectful not to see what's actually under there, which I think is wrong. It's a gross, absolutely beautiful. I don't know whether you can see that on the camera, but this is what they're covering up. Whether it's just to preserve, but it should, if it needs to be preserved, it should have some kind of see-through clear point over it. It shouldn't be covered up with a carpet. But what we have here is the knight, St. Thomas Holland, who lived and died on the 5th of February, 840th year. So we're looking at 840. That doesn't make sense, does it? Hang on. And in that of Overlord, 1625. 1625. He was lamented. Right, okay, so he died elsewhere, and he was lamented into here in 1625, which is quite interesting. Why was he brought here? But I don't know how much lighting we can actually get. If I try and move this out of the way, we can probably see a better point of that now. Now, this would explain the stories of the Headless Horseman, which we'll talk about on the next part of the clip. The story of the Headless Horseman that comes through this graveyard and travels up to the bridge. And no one ever knew why before. On any research you look online or in books, and all of a sudden we find a knight hidden. As I say, that knight is St. Thomas Holland. Sir Thomas Holland, should I say, sorry, not Sir Thomas Holland. So Sir Thomas Holland is the knight. We're going to talk about that shortly, about the Headless Horseman now, because there had to be a knight, but no one ever knew who the knight was. Well, he's been buried, he's been covered. So why would you cover him up? Stay tuned, we'll have a look at the next part. Place. We've just seen that what would have been the castle chambers of Queen Boudica, and we can see the original cemetery and the graveyard stones and the graveyard wall that's on the ends, where he reused it for field for farming. What's absolutely interesting, what's even fascinating was the story that was given, an account in 1763, and the account in 1763 was about Lord Albemarle, or one of the Lord Albemarles, an absolute drunkard, and in fact his entire reign, or Lord of the Manor really, he decided to have nothing more than eat copious amounts of food for gluttony and be a drunkard every day of the week and weekends. So he was always a drunk, known as a drunk, with all his variety. When he died, his wishes were that 12 local servants would have to get drunk, this is the story, would have to get drunk and then carry his coffin from church down to this very bridge where we're standing right now in Quidenham, and then go from the bridge down the road to the real resting place of Queen Boudica, which we're about to go to next. Now, it said that he expected them to carry his coffin from the church down over the bridge, down to where Queen Boudica's resting place is, and he thought that he was valued enough, to be buried where Queen Boudica is. Now, of course, that's the tale, and the story of the hauntings here is that basically, as they come over with the coffin down to this part of the bridge, is that they fall into the river and drown because they're so drunk. And that's a story that's been going on since 1763. The fact of the matter is, and the reality of the story is, that they didn't favour Lord Albemarle of that particular period much. In fact, they despised him, and so they were quite pleased of his death. And when they brought the coffin down as far as here to the bridge, they could think of nothing more disrespectful than to actually unearth Queen Boudica's resting place that's been secret for all these years. So they tossed his coffin, the 12 men tossed his coffin into the river below, that was much deeper than today, but and that was it. So he was just thrown out like trash. But the haunting story is still, the myths and the legends still will tell you that it was about 12 people that fell into the river. If 12 drunken men fell into a river and all drowned, one of them surely would have survived, or someone in the funeral procession would have helped them. So that makes no sense, because he is nothing but an urban legend. The fact is that he was tossed over the side like a piece of garbage,